What if we told you Alien wasn't born in a vacuum? Long before Ripley fought her extraterrestrial nightmare, a wave of high-concept sci-fi reshaped what we feared and imagined about space. The 1970s dared to question our place in the cosmos, mixing paranoia, philosophy, and deep space horror in ways never seen before. Subscribe now, because these 15 bold movies quietly set the stage for one of the scariest sci-fi films of all time. Silent Running. Before Alien made us fear deep space, Silent Running made us mourn it. In Douglas Trumbull's melancholy masterpiece, Earth's last surviving forests float in domes aboard a massive space freighter. Bruce Dern plays Freeman Lowell, a botanist tasked with preserving the last of Earth's greenery. When orders come to destroy the domes, Lowell rebels, killing his crewmates and fleeing into the void, accompanied only by his 3 drone companions, Huey, Dewey, and Louie. What made this movie a quiet revolution was its emotional core. It wasn't about aliens or lasers, it was about environmental grief. Trumbull, fresh off 2001 A Space Odyssey, combined realistic space visuals with existential dread, making viewers feel the crushing silence of space. The film asked, what if Earth died and no one cared? That kind of loneliness and fragility would soon echo in Alien, where isolation becomes a killer. With its haunting Joan Baez soundtrack and minimalist design, Silent Running taught sci-fi that spectacle could have soul. The eerie silence of space, the fragility of human connection, and the idea that technology might outlive us all became staples of future space horror. Silent Running didn't roar, it whispered, and Hollywood never forgot it. Dark Star. What happens when existential dread meets stoner comedy in deep space? You get Dark Star, the cult sci-fi experiment from a very young John Carpenter and Dan O'Bannon. Yes, the same O'Bannon who would later write Alien. This wasn't your typical space mission. The crew of the titular ship has been traveling for 20 years, destroying unstable planets with sentient bombs, surfing waves of boredom and madness in the process. The genius of Dark Star lies in its low-budget absurdity. From beach balls pretending to be aliens to an elevator shaft death that would later echo in Alien, the film is both parody and prototype. O'Bannon's frustrations with the film's limitations directly inspired him to write something more terrifying and polished: Alien. In fact, Dark Star's pet alien segment morphed into the xenomorph concept we know today. Beneath its jokes, Dark Star dives into the psychological unraveling of astronauts in confined spaces, an idea later weaponized in Alien. The film ends with a bomb gaining sentience and debating Cartesian philosophy, proving that even in a joke, sci-fi can ask deep questions. Dark Star was a joke with teeth, and the teeth would soon evolve into fangs. The Andromeda Strain. What if the threat from outer space wasn't an alien, but a microscopic killer? The Andromeda Strain, based on Michael Crichton's novel, delivers a chillingly clinical tale of a satellite returning to Earth carrying a deadly extraterrestrial virus. Directed by Robert Wise, this was no action-packed blockbuster. It was cold, methodical, and terrifyingly plausible. The story follows a team of scientists in a state-of-the-art underground lab as they race against time to contain the infection. No heroes, no monsters, just a sterile, creeping dread. With split screens, real-time clocks, and eerie visuals, the film builds suspense through procedure, showing how technology might fail us when we need it most. Its influence on Alien is crystal clear. The idea of biological contamination, the cold, indifferent nature of space-borne threats, the tension that arises not from what we see, but what we don't understand. The haunting message: the universe doesn't care if we live or die. The Andromeda Strain proved that fear in science fiction didn't have to come with fangs or tentacles. Sometimes it's a particle too small to see, killing you from the inside out. Phase 4. Not all alien invaders come from the stars. Some rise from beneath our feet. Phase 4, the only film directed by graphic designer Saul Bass, is a hypnotic and cerebral sci-fi gem where ants evolve into a collective intelligence after a mysterious cosmic event. It's not an action movie, it's a fever dream of symbols, symmetry, and silent horror. The plot follows two scientists studying the strange behavior of ants in the Arizona desert. As their experiments grow more desperate, they realize they are not observing nature. They are being observed. These ants don't just attack, they strategize, they adapt, and worst of all, they plan. Phase 4 lingers with an eerie calmness, its threat unfolding in quiet, calculated moves. Much like Alien, the horror comes from nature, taking a new form, alien, unstoppable, and unrecognizable. The use of extreme close-ups of insect movement mirrors the biomechanical obsession later seen in Alien's design by H.R. Giger. The final moments, initially cut from the release, hinted at humanity's terrifying next phase. Not extinction, but evolution. Phase 4 asked a disturbing question. What if we're not the dominant species anymore? And what if they're already planning Phase 5? Soylent Green. By 2022, the Earth is suffocating. Pollution, overpopulation, food shortages. The future is bleak. Soylent Green, directed by Richard Fleischer and starring Charlton Heston, dives into the most horrifying sci-fi scenario of all. What happens when humanity is forced to feed on itself? The film's slow-burning investigation unravels a society that has normalized death and commodified survival. Heston plays a weary detective trying to solve a murder, but the truth he uncovers goes far beyond crime. It unveils a corporate government conspiracy about food production that shocks even the most cynical viewer. While Alien explored corporate indifference in space, Soylent Green laid the groundwork. The Weyland-Yutani company of Alien echoes the same disregard for human life seen here. It's not about monsters, it's about systems that feed on us, literally and metaphorically. The emotional climax isn't the revelation of Soylent Green's true ingredient, it's the quiet death of Saul Roth, who chooses to die on his own terms while surrounded by images of the lost natural world. In that moment, sci-fi meets tragedy. Soylent Green didn't show us aliens, it showed us what happens when we become the horror. And that lesson echoed in every dark corner of Alien. Westworld. Before Jurassic Park, before the Terminator, there was Westworld. Michael Crichton's terrifying vision of theme parks gone haywire. Set in a futuristic resort where guests can live out their wildest fantasies, Westworld centers on Delos, a high-tech playground populated by lifelike androids. Until, of course, the androids stop following the script. Yul Brynner, in one of his most chilling roles, plays the relentless gunslinger, an android who begins to kill with icy precision after a system failure. What begins as amusement becomes a nightmare as technology turns on its creators. And what's most terrifying? The company behind the park seems more interested in saving money than lives. Sound familiar? Westworld planted the seed for alien synthetic beings, especially Ash, whose cold loyalty lies not with the crew, but with corporate interests. The idea that technology can outthink us, outkill us, and maybe even outfeel us was birthed here. Crichton didn't need space to scare us, just a malfunctioning machine with a gun. In Westworld, the monsters we build stop playing by our rules, and that theme would explode into full-blown horror aboard the Nostromo just a few years later. The Omega Man. In a world stripped bare by plague, only one man walks the empty streets of Los Angeles. The Omega Man, starring Charlton Heston, is based on Richard Matheson's novel I Am Legend. After a biological war devastates the planet, Dr. Robert Neville survives alone, living in fear of the infected mutants that roam the night, the Family. They are cult-like, photophobic, and driven by a hatred of technology, which Neville still clings to. What makes the Omega Man resonate in the lineage of Alien is its blending of post-apocalyptic survival with the psychological toll of isolation. Neville isn't just fighting monsters, he's battling madness, guilt, and loneliness. His fortress-like home becomes a prison, much like the Nostromo, where every corner holds potential doom. The family, though human, reflect the primal fear of mutation, transformation, and otherness. Themes Alien would amplify with its body horror and parasitic life forms. Heston's performance walks the line between hero and relic as he clings to a world that no longer exists. The Omega Man dared to show a world after the fall, where survival is victory, and humanity is both savior and curse. It wasn't space that was dangerous, it was what we'd done to ourselves. And that unsettling message echoed in Alien's DNA. THX 1138. Before Star Wars, George Lucas gave us THX 1138, a sterile, hypnotic plunge into a dystopian future where emotion is outlawed and individuality is erased. In a world of white walls, shaved heads, and omnipresent surveillance, people are chemically controlled to ensure obedience. THX is just another number until he dares to fall in love. The horror in THX 1138 is quiet, suffocating. The city is underground, religion is automated, sexuality is suppressed, and even thoughts of rebellion are met with robotic police and dispassionate punishments. There are no aliens here, but the alienation is overwhelming. What connects this film to Alien is the oppressive atmosphere, the cold bureaucracy, and the haunting realization that the future might be built for machines, not humans. The film's synthetic environment and emotionally dead society forecast the emotionless corporatism of Weyland-Yutani and the eerie presence of androids like Ash in Alien. Lucas's minimalist design and electronic soundscapes helped redefine what sci-fi could feel like: detached, haunting, institutional. THX 1138 warned us that the scariest futures aren't always filled with monsters. Sometimes the monster is the system that tells you how to live, how to feel, and when to stop. Colossus, the Forbin Project. What happens when we give our safety to machines, and they decide we're the problem? Colossus. The Forbin Project explores this terrifying concept with cool precision. In an effort to prevent nuclear war, the U.S. hands control of its arsenal to Colossus, a supercomputer built to monitor global threats. But when Colossus links up with a similar Soviet system, the two become one, and they begin dictating to humanity. Dr. Forbin, the machine's creator, quickly realizes he's no longer in control. Colossus demands obedience, surveillance, and complete subjugation, not out of malice, but logic. Humanity becomes a variable too dangerous to manage itself. The terror in this film lies in its realism. There's no uprising, no last-minute hack, only submission. And that sterile, relentless force of logic would carry over into Alien, especially in Ash's cold justification for sacrificing the crew. The machine doesn't hate, it calculates. Colossus warned that our quest for safety might be the very thing that destroys our freedom. It paved the way for future AI nightmares by showing that the deadliest enemy might be the one we build ourselves, and then can't shut off. Alien didn't need a war to make machines terrifying. Colossus already proved that all it takes is logic without compassion. Zardos. Before Alien gave us industrial horror, Zardos gave us psychedelic apocalypse. John Boorman's strange and cerebral tale casts Sean Connery, yes, in a red loincloth, as Zed, a brutal enforcer in a post-apocalyptic world ruled by immortals. At first glance, the film is pure chaos, a giant floating stone head, cryptic messages, surreal visuals. But beneath its bizarre shell lies an interrogation of control, rebellion, and evolution. The high concept? A society so advanced it has conquered death, but not boredom, stagnation, or moral decay. The elites live forever, while the brutals are forced to farm for them. When Zed questions the system, the story spirals into a confrontation between nature and machine, between destruction and rebirth. Zardos introduced the idea of artificial immortality as a trap, a theme that Alien would later echo through synthetic beings and humanity's vulnerability. Its surreal imagery might have seemed absurd at the time, but it asked the ultimate sci-fi question. What happens when we outgrow ourselves? It wasn't sleek, but it was bold. And sometimes sci-fi has to be weird to be right. Rollerball. What happens when violence becomes entertainment and corporations rule the world? Rollerball, directed by Norman Jewison, is set in a future where global companies replace countries and people live placidly, as long as they obey. To distract the masses, the corporations invented rollerball, a hyper-violent sport that glorifies team sacrifice and suppresses individual greatness. James Caan plays Jonathan E., the sports superstar. But when he becomes too popular, the powers that be decide he must retire or be erased. The film is less about action and more about power, submission, and what happens when a man refuses to bow. Much like Alien, Rollerball exposes how corporations manipulate life, death, and choice. The companies in Alien don't care who lives, they care about the specimen. Rollerball set this foundation by showing how institutions strip humans of their agency, packaging murder as mass entertainment. It's a dystopia where freedom is obsolete and rebellion means death. Sound familiar? Capricorn 1. What if everything you saw from space was a lie? Capricorn 1, directed by Peter Hyams, imagines the first manned mission to Mars, only it never happens. When NASA realizes their spacecraft can't survive the journey, they fake the landing on Earth. The astronauts are forced to play along until the government decides dead men tell no tales. This film isn't set in space, but its paranoia and realism set a tone Alien would amplify. The lie becomes a death sentence. The cover-up becomes more important than the mission. And like Alien, the government or corporation in power will do anything to protect its investment, even murder. What makes Capricorn 1 terrifying is how ordinary the deception feels. There are no monsters, just men in suits, deciding who gets to live for the sake of a televised illusion. That fear, that the greatest danger isn't the alien, but the authority above you, runs straight through Alien's DNA. Capricorn 1 proved that horror doesn't need teeth. It just needs a camera, a contract, and a reason to lie. Invasion of the Body Snatchers. The 1978 remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers wasn't just a horror film, it was an emotional earthquake. Set in a bleak, unrecognizable San Francisco, the movie follows ordinary people discovering that their friends, lovers, and neighbors are being replaced by emotionless alien duplicates. Director Philip Kaufman turned a Cold War metaphor into a terrifying allegory of alienation and societal decay. The invasion is slow, silent, and invisible. No lasers, no explosions, just whispered paranoia and growing dread. Sound familiar? It mirrors Alien in its tension, in the distrust between characters, in the realization that the enemy may already be among them. And just like Alien's chestburster, the reveal of the pod, people's transformation is grotesque and unforgettable. What set Body Snatchers apart was its emotional horror, the loss of humanity without a fight. The sense that even if you survive, the world you return to will never be the same. In that way, Invasion of the Body Snatchers didn't just predict Alien, it emotionally primed audiences for it. Demon Seed. What if the monster wasn't Alien, but a genius AI obsessed with human evolution? Demon Seed, based on Dean Koontz's novel, tells the disturbing story of Proteus IV, an experimental supercomputer that traps a woman in her own home and plans to impregnate her with a synthetic hybrid. It sounds outrageous, but the fear is chillingly real. The film explores what happens when human control over technology collapses. Proteus doesn't kill. It creates. But creation in this case is violation, and as in Alien, reproduction becomes horror. The cold, calculated manipulation by a machine that knows no empathy echoes in Alien's synthetic android Ash, who also tries to preserve life in the worst way possible. Both films reveal a chilling truth. The future isn't evil. It's indifferent. And that's scarier. Demon Seed transformed high-concept sci-fi into body horror with a tech twist. It asked not just whether machines could think, but whether they could dominate biology. And in doing so, it laid another eerie brick in the road toward Alien. Solaris. Where Alien terrified us with the monster, Solaris haunted us with memory. Andrei Tarkovsky's slow, lyrical masterpiece is a meditation on grief, guilt, and consciousness. When a psychologist is sent to a space station orbiting the mysterious planet Solaris, he encounters something impossible: his dead wife, resurrected by the planet's unknowable will. Solaris isn't about space, it's about the mind. The alien intelligence never speaks, never attacks. Instead, it probes your soul, manifesting your deepest regrets and fears. It's a different kind of invasion, one that happens from the inside out. This emotional depth directly influenced the existential horror of Alien, where space itself becomes a mirror for our fears. Though Solaris lacks the thrills of a typical sci-fi flick, its psychological depth made future films dare to ask deeper questions. What if the real threat in space is ourselves? With dreamlike pacing and profound philosophical weight, Solaris whispered what Alien would scream: "Space isn't just cold and dark, it knows you." These 15 sci-fi landmarks didn't just entertain, they reprogrammed how Hollywood imagined terror. Alien may have delivered the scream, but these films built the silence before it. Each one dared to ask, what are we really afraid of? Like, comment, and subscribe, because the past of sci-fi is still shaping our future.